All right, folks, you need to hear this because what just came out of the mouth of Pete Hegseth is raising serious eyebrows across the political world. In a fiery statement about the escalating conflict with Iran, Hegseth didn't just talk tough about the enemy, he effectively dropped a bombshell about how this war is being run and what it means for American troops. He openly bragged that U.S. warfighters have been given maximum authority, that the fight was never meant to be fair, and that the strategy is to punch them while they're down. Those aren't just dramatic words. They reveal a mindset about warfare that could have massive consequences for the men and women on the front lines. So tonight, we're going to break down exactly what Hegseth said, why critics say it exposes a dangerous approach to the conflict, and why some veterans and analysts are warning this rhetoric could come back to haunt the very troops he claims to support. Stay with me because the details get even more explosive.
We are only 4 days into this, and the results have been incredible. Historic, really. Only the United States of America could lead this. Only us. But when you add the Israeli Defense Forces, a devastatingly capable force, the combination is sheer destruction for our radical Islamist Iranian adversaries. They are toast, and they know it. Or at least, soon enough, they will know it. And we have only just begun to hunt, dismantle, demoralize, destroy, and defeat their capabilities. Just 4 days in. We're playing for keeps. Our warfighters have maximum authorities granted personally by the president and yours truly. Our rules of engagement are bold, precise, and designed to unleash American power, not shackle it. This was never meant to be a fair fight, and it is not a fair fight. We are punching them while they're down, which is exactly how it should be. Iran cannot outlast us. We're going to ensure through violence of action and our offensive capabilities and our defensive capabilities, as I said, that we set the tone and the tempo of this fight. And that's why we don't talk about, you can say 4 weeks, but it could be 6, it could be 8, it could be 3. Ultimately, we set the pace and the tempo. The enemy is off balance, and we're going to keep them off balance.
When Pete Hegseth declared that Iran was toast, that the war was never meant to be a fair fight, and that American forces would keep punching them while they're down, he didn't just deliver a tough-talking soundbite, he revealed a deeply troubling mindset about war, power, and the human consequences of both. The problem isn't simply that the rhetoric is aggressive. War is often discussed in blunt terms. The problem is that Hegseth's language treats military conflict like a spectacle of domination rather than a deadly reality that places thousands of lives, American and otherwise, at enormous risk. When political commentators start speaking as though warfare is a highlight reel of destruction, it exposes a dangerous disconnect between those who talk about war and those who must actually fight it. Hegseth framed the early stage of the campaign against Iran as a triumphal demonstration of overwhelming force, boasting about historic results just days into the conflict, and praising the combined might of the United States and the Israel Defense Forces as if this were a contest designed purely to prove superiority. But such language glosses over the brutal complexity of modern warfare. Conflicts involving Iran carry enormous regional implications, ranging from potential escalation across the Middle East to economic shocks and diplomatic fallout, and pretending that victory is already inevitable is not just reckless rhetoric, it's strategically irresponsible. War has a long history of humbling those who assume the outcome is predetermined. What makes Hegseth's comments particularly alarming is the way he celebrated what he described as maximum authorities granted to American warfighters and rules of engagement designed specifically to unleash American power. To many observers, that phrase signals a troubling emphasis on force without equal emphasis on restraint, accountability, or the difficult ethical judgments that responsible military leadership requires. Military professionals know that discipline, clear legal boundaries, and careful decision-making are what protect both civilians and troops from the catastrophic consequences of uncontrolled escalation. Yet Hegseth's tone suggested that restraint is a weakness rather than a necessity. Even more concerning was his repeated insistence that the war was intentionally unfair, that the objective was to strike an enemy already off balance and keep them there through relentless pressure. In a purely tactical sense, military forces do aim to exploit advantages, but presenting that reality in the language of domination and humiliation risks reducing warfare to a simplistic narrative of crushing an opponent rather than understanding the broader strategic environment. Conflicts are rarely resolved through brute force alone. They are shaped by political legitimacy, alliances, economic pressure, and international perception. When influential voices speak about war as if it is a straightforward exercise in destruction, they encourage a mindset that overlooks the long-term consequences of military action. There is also a glaring contradiction at the heart of Hegseth's comments. He presents himself as an advocate for American troops while simultaneously endorsing rhetoric that could place those troops in greater danger. Inflamed language and public boasts about crushing an adversary can harden opposition, strengthen propaganda narratives, and provoke retaliatory responses that ultimately endanger soldiers deployed in volatile regions. History shows that wars fueled by bravado often become longer, bloodier, and far more complicated than their early champions ever predicted. Moreover, framing the conflict as a near-certain victory only days into combat creates unrealistic expectations for the public and for policymakers. If the war becomes protracted, or if unforeseen setbacks occur, the same rhetoric that once projected confidence can quickly erode credibility and public trust. Responsible commentary about war requires humility about uncertainty and respect for the stakes involved. Instead, Hegseth's remarks sounded less like sober analysis and more like an attempt to score political points through exaggerated displays of toughness. That approach might energize certain audiences, but it does little to foster a serious national conversation about strategy, diplomacy, or the cost of sustained conflict. War should never be treated as a stage for chest-thumping declarations of dominance. It is a grave decision that reshapes nations, destroys lives, and leaves consequences that last for generations. The troubling aspect of Hegseth's message is not merely its hostility toward Iran, it is the casual confidence with which he frames destruction as the defining measure of success. True leadership during wartime requires clarity, caution, and a deep awareness of the moral and strategic responsibilities that accompany the use of force. What Hegseth offered instead was a performance built on bravado, one that celebrates overwhelming power while ignoring the sobering reality that war rarely unfolds, according to the confident predictions of its loudest commentators.